Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is a Ukraine war breaking news update. I've got an update extra, half recorded, and the rest of the content ready to go. In fact, I've got loads of content, and it's turned out that I think I've got to speak about this because there's so much of it going on at the moment, and it would be too much to talk about in my news piece tomorrow. It is developing. Please take into account that some of these claims might not be true. It's a dynamic situation, and some of the claims make you think, "Oh, that's interesting. Is that definitely the case?" And it might not be the case. So just bear that in mind, and we'll see what happens as the dust settles. Of course, what are we talking about? Well, this incursion that I mentioned in the news piece this morning in the border to the northeast of Kharkiv, the city. That's the Kharkiv Oblast bordering the Belgorod Oblast of Russia, and we are talking about where we previously had an incursion into Grivoron, which is, let's see, there's Novaya Tavolzhanka. So that's where and Shebekino, that's where the incursion is now. And the previous incursion was over at a place called Grivoron, which is, where are you? There you are. So Grivoron is there. Let's see what the distance is. Just to give you a sense of what's going on. So it's about 85 kilometers to the east of where the previous incursion was. And this incursion over the border is, let's just get that as a crow flies. That's about 7.5 kilometers, but to the edge, probably about 5 kilometers there. That's where the activity supposedly is. Okay, what's going on? Well, this morning I said pretty much this, which is a freedom of Russian Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps are claiming they're currently fighting on the outskirts of the town of Shebekino, and that is indeed what they're still claiming in the Belgorod region, specifically in the settlements of Novaya Tavolzhanka and Titovka, which are both roughly 3 miles from the Ukrainian border. So far, there's been no visual evidence of this taking place, although there is an awful lot of visual evidence of stuff happening, unlike their previous incursion into the Belgorod region. Indeed, here is some video footage. Have no idea where that is exactly, who's firing at whom, and so on and so forth. But that's happening in and around the area. Right, the Belgorod military administration stated earlier this morning that 3 groups of insurgents utilizing technicals, those are SUVs, guns mounted on the back, and light armor attempted to cross the border into the region near the Shebekino border checkpoint, but that each of the groups were beat back by artillery and heavy armor of the Russian armed forces. So the Russian military administrations, or at least the local administrations, are saying nothing to worry about here. We have defeated the incursion. We've beaten back 3 groups of insurgents. But then you get videos like this coming out, which appear to suggest that is not the case. So he says, and I'll just, you don't need to listen to him, but I'll read what he says. So he says, hello, the city Shebekino is now being evacuated. There is massive shelling. The men are still holding on, but it's not clear whether it will be possible to hold on or not. I don't know which men he's talking about there. Everyone who sees repost showed that this is not Shebekino, but Shebekino. I don't know what the reference quite is there. And now there are fights going on. Let talking heads know that this is not just some BS addressing Russian politicians who ignore the situation in Shebekino. So saying this is really, really happening. And that's that kind of thing's being posted. Okay, well, let's try and get a grasp on what's actually going on. Here we have Phillips O'Brien talking about giving a thread on the information here. So lots of talk about another incursion into Russia in Belgorod Oblast by Russian volunteers, one imagines Ukrainian sponsored. Well, if there's some of the kit that's claimed to be used is being used, then definitely being supported by Ukrainians, right? And then referring to this very striking bit of video. So Telegram channels wrote about an alleged tank attack on the checkpoint near Shebekino in the Belgorod region of Russia. Fighters of the Russian Volunteer Corps published this video and announced the second phase of the offensive on the territory of Russia. That's an administrative building apparently up in Shebekino that is on fire. The roof is on fire in a number of places, so that looks like it has been shelled. But again, you might wonder about the wisdom of all this, but nevertheless, it's happening. So here, the Russian Volunteer Corps reported that it is fighting in the suburbs of Shebekino in the village of Novaya Todvolzhanka and Titovka. The MOD of Russia said it repelled the 3 attacks and thwarted the terrorist attack on Shebekino. So that's repeating what has been said before. Philip O'Brien continues, also reports of explosions in Belgorod city itself, and then referring to video footage there to suggest that. So let's go and see how far Belgorod city is. I mean, it's not unusual for Belgorod to be attacked with aerial munitions, drones and rockets and whatnot. Belgorod, the city, is how far from the front line, well, from the border, sorry. That's about 30 kilometers. So depending on what you're using, you could hit that with some form of artillery as well if you are really close to the border. But anyway, that has been hit. Belgorod has been hit. Ukraine is clearly putting pressure on Putin to divert Russian forces to defend Russia's own border. It's shocking just how few troops the Russians seem to have on their border with Ukraine. Twice now, irregular forces seem to have basically moved in easily. This seems to be what they're trying to do, which is show the Russians this, fix Russian troops in the area, fix Russian equipment, air defense systems, tanks, APCs, all that kind of stuff to the area, just by throwing a bunch of smaller volunteer forces into the Russian territory. And I think there is some wisdom in that. In the previous incursion, I think there was also some targets that they were planning on getting that were part of the Ukrainian, very much part of the Ukrainian strategy. They got some electronic warfare equipment that was of really high value that they captured. So I don't think it was just a case of running in, causing some havoc, and doing a runner. So Philip O'Brien said it shows how Ukraine has been disadvantaged in its war fighting so far, having to limit operations just to Ukrainian territory. What I call the Belgorod raid, trying to equal an unequal playing field. I'll be talking about that in my news piece tomorrow. There's been some things said by different nations about whether weapons can be used inside Russia that the Ukrainians are given. These Belgorod events are Ukrainian shaping operations, which actually seem to be having a real effect. And I agree, I'm starting to come around to this more. As I wrote earlier today, the counteroffensive is being well constructed. It may accomplish more than some are saying. Story that these Russian volunteers have tanks and helicopters. That would be interesting if it's shown to be true. I'll come to that in a second because that is super important. And then he finishes off by saying, speaking of the Belgorod raids, Elliot Cohen is saying that they're not holding back. He's not holding back as he criticizes the Biden administration for saying they were opposed to such operations. Again, this sort of does make some politicians and military people outside of Ukraine get a bit jittery, but personally, I think, well, you look what Russia have done. I don't think you've got any room for complaints there. Now, the claim here is helicopters of the Russian Volunteer Corps. I mean, they wouldn't have helicopters. So this is where they have to have support from the Ukrainians. You don't pick these up in a secondhand shop. The helicopters of the Russian Volunteer Corps in the skies of the Belgorod region are striking at the mercenaries of the Moscow junta. Apparently, the Russian Volunteer Corps has seized Mi-24 combat helicopters and Mi-8 transport helicopters, as well as T-72B tanks from Putin's army. Now, what is the truth of this? I mean, are these the people we're talking about? Is that helicopter a Ukrainian one? Is it the Russian Volunteer Corps? How do they get them? Have they nicked it off the Russians? Or is this something that the Ukrainians have given them? What's going on? I don't know. And this is where I say, be careful of these claims. I'm not confirming they're true, just that these claims are out there. And he continues, it's conducting successful battles in the Belgorod region. Putin's regime is unable to stop the National Liberation Movement and is powerlessly bombing Russian villages defended by the RDC militia. So obviously that's full of kind of emotive language, very sort of pro-Ukrainian position, of course. But the question is, are these things, true? What we do appear to know, I guess, or this video footage seems to suggest that people are escaping from Shebekino, that all is not well there, so something is happening. We've got, traffic getting out there. We've got police, we've got army, emergency services. Something funky is going on, that's for sure. An OSINT defender again adds that units from the Russian ground forces including T-72B3 tanks, have been observed arriving in the town of Shebekino in the Belgorod region, near where the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps claim they're currently engaged in heavy fighting. Again, is that what we're looking at there? Is that definitely in that local area? So on and so forth. Yeah. And then we have no reports thread on this. It started this morning. So the Belgorod thread, Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom Legion have entered the region. Heavy battles are reported near Shebekino. So that's what we heard earlier. Then this morning, police building on fire in Shebekino. Governor of the Belgorod region claimed that there was no enemy on the territory of the region. He said the Russian forces and border guards are in place, but it's odd that there's sort of burning buildings and all sorts going on the border of the Belgorod region in the area of Novaya Tobolzhanka. The battle continues. Russian media reports. That was, though, 9 hours ago. The Russian Volunteer Corps report that they covered Russian Federation fighters hiding in the administration building with Grad MLRS. So that is going to be the flaming buildings here being hit by Grad rocket launchers, multiple launch rocket systems. Here, that's the image there. Looks to have been hit by Grads, I would surmise. Reported as the administrative building of the Shebekino district, Belgorod region, employers are burning documents as they expect volunteers to enter. Really? That seems a bizarre thing. I'm just trying to piece this all together and see whether this is genuine footage. Is that the sort of thing you would expect from this kind of tiny incursion? Why would they be burning Russian documents in Russia? The insurgent forces reportedly destroyed a T2 S4 Tyulpan heavy mortar and truck loaded with ammunition during today's clashes in the Belgorod region, which I also reported earlier. Freedom of Russia Legion published footage of the destruction of those bits of kit, a Kamaz as well with ammunition, and supposedly multiple launch rocket system of the Russians too. Here we have smoke rising over Shebekino and the surrounding areas in the region, and Russian media reports heavy shelling. The terrorists of the Kiev regime are driven back. This is a quote: having suffered significant losses, no violations of the state border were allowed. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reports, and that was 5 hours ago. And they claim that 30 insurgents were killed. And then subsequent to that, we've seen some equipment of the Russians getting taken out near Novaya Tobolzhanka, but I can't quite work out what's hit there. It sort of splices to something burning later on. Yeah, there you go. And something's burning, but can't tell what it is. Have some that footage I showed you already of fighting supposedly on the outskirts. And now we have reports of a monocrystal LLC plant in Shebekino. It's a sapphire factory for high-tech applications burning, and that's some really thick black smoke burning there. And this is reportedly the movement of insurgent forces in Novaya Tobolzhanka. So this is very quick moving vehicles, but again, confirmation is it definitely who the video claims they are, etc., etc. And then no reports continues that Putin has awarded the head of the administration of the Shebekino urban district, Vladimir Zhdanov, with the Order of Courage. I've translated that, and that is what that is, ordered at 2:20 local time today. So, 2:40, sorry. So that's weird, but then I can't confirm that that's just what that says. Is there any confirmation that's really what that is, and what the intentions were behind that, so on and so forth? Smoke in the capital of Belgorod region. There are reports that prior to that, planes flew by. So do we have Ukrainian planes flying in the Belgorod region, or no? So that's going to be surely Russian planes, as we saw in the previous incursion. Russian planes did do flybys and drop some bombs to try and take out the Russian pro-Ukrainians. The Russian army reinforcements arriving that we've already seen, so on and so forth. So there's just an awful lot of stuff happening. And Tim White just adds, finally, Russia sent fighter jets to Belgorod as witnessed by locals. 11 people are said to have been injured in the trouble in Shebekino, 4 seriously wounded. It's all happening. But quite what is happening, I don't know. I don't know whether now the pro-Ukrainian Russians have pulled back. I mean, they can easily hit Shebekino with artillery there. And in fact, that's the same with any placed within sort of 20 kilometers of the Ukrainian border here. So you can easily believe that Shebekino is on fire, but it doesn't necessarily mean that troops are fighting there. They could be taking pot shots from within the Ukrainian border. Anyway, no certifiable conclusions from me other than something's going on. Pro-Ukrainian Russians might be there, or they might not. They might have helicopters to use, and if they do, surely Ukraine is providing those to them, but they might not. I don't know if those claims are particularly reliable. Just that's all the information. We all need to pick through as to what we think is verifiable. Stuff will be confirmed over the next 48 hours for sure, but I thought I'd give you all of that, mainly so I don't have to do that tomorrow morning. I can just therefore give the summaries tomorrow morning, or confirm or disconfirm some of what I've just said. Anyway, let me know down below if you find any more information out, and we can sort of assimilate that into what we think is actually going on. Take care, and I'll speak to you later. I may bring out an extra video much later, but I've already brought out enough content today, right? Take care, speak to you soon.